I should have been a cowboy. I should have learned to roll around.
You got your drink? I got a bubbly.
Okay,
This is also technically a bubbly. Dude,
Ooh, but it's gonna be tough to pop these while we hold our rapper mics.
I know, man. I thought
have
about
enough
that earlier.
hands.
Okay, ready?
Oh, it's everywhere.
Spills on self. Gosh dang it.
On that note, welcome back to Should Have Been a Cowboy.
Felipe, how you doing, my man?
I'm good, Cole. I miss you, buddy. I just want to say that right off the top.
It's been a long time.
I get so used to seeing this guy on a regular basis now with the podcast. How have you been? Merry Christmas to you and your family. Give us a little Cole's notes as to what has happened the past few weeks.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you and to everybody who's been tuning into the podcast. We've been getting some great feedback. We're loving it. Trying to upgrade. Cole's notes on what's been going on. It's just been sunny and 75 in Arizona every day. Dusty as hell. I've jackpotted 3 times, have not won any money. So ask me how I'm feeling about that crap. But no, we're having a lot of fun. We are getting to rope lots. We spent some time in Colorado 3 days for an early Christmas with Tiger's parents. And then we spent Christmas Day with the Quam family down here in Maricopa. So yeah, man, we're having fun, trying to enjoy it. How about you? You were in Brazil. Now you're back. Tell us about your Christmas.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. The build up to Christmas got super busy. I went to Brazil to do a talk, and then I had to bounce right back, go to Houston, do a talk there, went back to Brazil, did an event, and then came back just before Christmas to spend it with Clarita here in Alberta. It's been great weather. We're really feel blessed because you're from Alberta, so you know what it can be like during Christmas and this time of the year.
Bad.
Yeah, exactly. That's one word.
Dad,
and that word is
a
bad.
Brand new tractor too that has a nice cab on it. So I'm like, dang, old man, how do you like that heat now? Like we've literally just been running old John Deeres. That was what the John Deeres were, okay? The old things, you had to bundle up like you're a frickin', I don't know, going into the Antarctic to do science to get on these tractors and go plow snow. So I'm happy for him now that he's got a nice cab with some heat.
That's so funny. But yeah, buddy, it's been beautiful. Like 8 degrees, 4 degrees, -1. It's unbelievable. Got to go skiing the other day with Clarita at Lake Louise. I'd never been to Lake Louise. And, I grew up out east in Ontario. Our biggest mountain is like, what the hell is it called? Blue Mountain?
No, I think you mean Molehill. Your biggest mountain is a molehill.
Yeah, pretty much. Exactly. So, to come out here, bro, and ski these actual mountains, I snowboard, she skis, is unbelievable. It's so beautiful, bro. I love it. I love this province.
Dude, I know. I do like Lake Louise a lot. Yet to get out to Revelstoke. Heard nothing but good things about the powder out there and that mountain. Have not been yet, but hopefully soon one day. Go shred some gnar.
Yeah, bro, we got to come back so we can have some fun out here. And today's guest, I'm super excited. We're talking to Jake. He's the author of the book, The Lost Cowboy. Mm-hmm. He's cowboyed in 6 continents over the past 4 years. How cool is that shit?
Man, that's next level right there, Calvin. That's what I love about cowboying too, is like, I just had this conversation with a friend the other day. There's rodeo cowboys, and then there's cowboys that can literally drift from the back of a horse to the back of a horse all over the world, right? There's a cowboy like yourself who rides across these continents. Like, it's incredible what this guy has done and seen, and we're gonna see if he's snowboarded on some of these continents too, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to chat to him and just. Like, man, I talk about this all the time, the similarities that all these people share, whether you're a cowboy, vaquero, whether you're a charro, or, whether you're in Mongolia. Like, this guy has gone to places I haven't been. So I'm super excited. Europe, Mongolia, Australia. I know the cowboying is really wild out there, down under. And the other cool part about this, and let's see if you agree with me, I find the majority of cowboys don't travel.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%, dude. We've talked about this before about how, everybody.
That's why we're such good friends. Right?
Yeah, literally, we were able to connect on that and bond about that because it seems like, if you're a cowboy, you come here to see what you're worth, whether it's in the pro rodeos or to come get a job at the 4-6s or whatever it is your dream is. Like, cowboys come here to North America. North American cowboys don't leave to go other places.
They don't leave.
Right?
Exactly.
So
They're either following the tour, like they're in the circuit, they're rodeoing, or they're taking care of animals. And when
Yeah.
you take care of animals, you can't travel. So that's one of the things that, like you said, really, I think connected us is the fact that we're both cowboys. We love this Western life, but we also love to travel. You know, you've been to Mexico, you've been to Central America,
Yeah.
and you have this desire to go other places, as do I. So I'm really excited to talk to Jake about that, because it's not often that you can meet someone like that that shares both of these passions, right?
Absolutely. So let's get to them.
What's up, buddy?
How's it going? Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear
Got
you
you loud and clear.
perfectly. Yeah, we got you. Where you at right now again?
I'm in Wyoming, Laramie, Wyoming.
Oh, that's cowboy country right there, sir.
Yeah, I apologize. I gotta do this in like the laundry room, but it's where the Wi-Fi is best and it's quiet.
Man, that laundry room looks pretty badass. Like, you could be cooking meth, or you could be saddling horses. Like, a lot of different things could be happening in that room right there. Buddy, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us today. I was just talking to Cole that we have an email dating back to 2019, which is so awesome. I just fished it out. When a friend of yours that worked at the production company that I worked at told me, hey, my buddy's doing this awesome trip around the world, cowboying in all these different continents, and he wanted to talk to you about publishing the book and stuff. So that's pretty funny. When I saw your book for the first time at Cowboy Christmas last year, I think I was at the Western Horseman booth. And I was like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, damn, that's Jake that I spoke to in 2019. So congratulations on getting the book out, because I know that it's not easy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it was it was kind of a grind. It took like 4 years to really get the book written and edited and put out there into the world. So it was a bit of a process.
I always
Absolutely.
say it's like having a baby, right? Like you got to work so hard, and when everything works, because the stars need to align, there's so much work that gets done. You know, when you finally hold it, it's an unbelievable moment, because you know all the sweat, the blood that went into it, and there's been a lot of sweat to go into this story, because you lived it. You cowboyed in 6 continents, 4 years, places people don't even dream about of going. You were down there feeling the wind on your face and getting sunburned and getting bucked off horses. And I think that's so awesome, man. I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait to read the book. I haven't read it yet, but I'm super excited to read the book. I'm sure it's full of amazing stories. But to kick us off, I just wanted you to kind of run through what the book is about. The Lost Cowboy, it's called. You can find it online if you love reading, but just tell us a little bit what people can find in the book.
Yeah, the book is on it's on Amazon, and it's also on Audible. I've got an audiobook copy of it, so if you're more of a listener, it's on there, but it's pretty easy to find on either one.
That's awesome. Give us a run through of what the book's about.
Okay, so basically the book is a memoir, and from the age of 21 to 25, I spent pretty much all of my time traveling around the world, and first I went to Australia and caught wild cattle down there, feral cattle. After that, I went to Argentina, lived with the gauchos down there, and worked on a couple different estancias, they call them. Then from there, I went to Sweden, and I worked on the biggest cattle production place in Sweden. It was very rare to find one of those, so I got very lucky there. And then from Sweden, I went down to South Africa, and I worked all around South Africa on a bunch of different outfits down there. After South Africa, I went to Mexico, spent a couple months down in Mexico. Mexico is where I started writing the book. And we could talk more about that later if you want. And then last place I went to was Mongolia, and I went and lived with the last people on Earth that ride reindeer as their main source of transportation. And then I spent a bunch of time working for an outfitter over there as well.
Wait, you lived with Cole's family?
Dude, riding reindeer, like what's harder to start, a 2-year-old or a reindeer? Like, genuinely asking, man, do you just snaffle bit that son of a gun and swing on him? Like, what is going on?
So the reindeer, they're not very big animals and they're not very strong. So, I'm not a big guy. When I was there, I probably weighed 170 pounds. And if you were any bigger than me, you couldn't ride one. They're just not big and strong enough to carry a person. So that being said, it's a lot like riding like a roping steer kind of. And they're probably not going to buck you off, and you just kind of plow rein them around, point them in the right direction, and that's about it. They're not going to sit back and spin around, for you or anything like that. So you really have like it's a throat latch essentially that's tied around them, and it goes up to their horns, and you just kind of plow rein them around. There's nothing fancy about it.
That
And
sounds
so
awesome.
those guys would break those reindeer, and it was no big rodeo or anything like that. I mean, it was just kind of jump on one, and they're already somewhat domesticated, so it's like taking a show steer or something and hopping on it. And so they're kind of gentle. You just gotta, get through the first 10 minutes, and then they're more or less broke.
Man, that
Are they
is
like are there
hilarious.
breeding programs for these reindeer? Like, are we talking like American quarter horse shit? Like, are they like
He's
is there a
registered.
Frenchman's guy of the reindeer? Like Dash for Cash
National Reindeer Association.
Association. Well, I mean, but it's such a strong part of humanity, right? To cross things that will produce better, right? Whether you're talking beef and fatten them up, or so maybe it's a joke, but maybe they do kind of keep track of which ones are better and which ones are worse, right?
Yeah, they certainly, they'll cut the, essentially geldings or, steers, whatever they call them, and they'll keep a bull around, the best bull, and so they kind of are selecting that way. But those families up there used to eat those reindeer. It was, that was part of why they kept them around. And
Right.
and now, because that culture, the Tadin culture is what it's called, is more or less gone. I probably within our lifetimes that language and that way of life will probably disappear. And so because of that, the Mongolian government saw that it was kind of dying, and so these people that live out there, they can't really read or write. They don't have phones or anything like that. They're just way out there. But the government will subsidize those reindeer, and they do it per head. So just recently, I guess probably in the past 10 or 15 years, these people have figured out that eating them is way more expensive than just keeping them alive and getting a bigger subsidy check from the government. So they've switched over a lot of they still milk them. We'd go out and milk reindeer every morning and every afternoon. But so the dairy is still part of their diet. But
What's the milk like? What does it
Yeah.
taste like?
it's good. I don't really have problem with dairy. A lot of people I know do, and in all these travels and stuff, I never once got food sickness of any kind.
Wow.
I think I just got guts like a dog, and
Like a res
so-
dog.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I can eat anything, drink anything. It doesn't bother me. But those reindeer, they'd go out and we milked horses a lot there too, and horse milk
Yep.
is probably the best tasting milk I've ever tasted. It's super high in lactose, which is a
Yeah,
sugar,
it's really good.
very sweet.
Very sweet. Yes, sir. Just like the meat as well. Did you ever eat horse meat?
I did, but the Mongolian the way that so they don't have a refrigeration, so everything would get chopped up and essentially turned into a jerky or something like that, dried out so
Right.
that it would last.
Yes, sir.
And so when we would either be eating jerky or they would throw it like into a soup of some kind. So I didn't never in Mongolia did I have like a nice fresh cut of meat. It was always kind of boiled meat that had been dried out and salted and stuff. So I wouldn't say it was the best representation of taste.
Yeah,
What
it
is-
tastes very sweet as well. The meat, the horse meat, and I mean, just because we have a connection with the horse, I'm sure you're the same way, Cole. Like, it's tough knowing that you're eating a horse, but it's like any kind of meat, but very sweet. Go ahead, Cole. Sorry, I cut you off there.
I was just curious what the Coors Light of Mongolia is.
Mare milk, brat.
Well, yeah, the mare milk. So there's two answers to that. The mare's milk, because they don't have refrigeration, they ferment it. So they take
Yes.
like two goat skins and they'll sew them together about 90% of the way, and then on the top there's a little slit, and that's where they'll pour it in. And these goat skins have bacteria cultures in them, like sourdough or like yogurt or anything like that. And some of these cultures are hundreds of years old.
Damn.
And they'll dump that milk in there just every day, because mares don't have a very big udder, so you're milking them 4 or 5 times a day when they're lactating.
Oh, damn.
And so
It's
you'll
hard in the
take that.
hands.
Yeah, it's a pretty much a full-time job. That's what the wives do while the husbands are out. That's, at least in my experience, that's what I saw, is the women would stick around home and go out there and milk those mares a couple times a day. And then you take that bucket and dump it into the goat skin, and it ferments in there. So you're drinking fermented milk, which, it tastes, if you've ever had that stuff that you can buy it at the grocery store, that kefir, I don't know how you say it, but it's just, you can buy it at Walmart or any grocery store, and it's with the yogurt, and it's just kind of a probiotic drink that people drink. And
Right.
that's obviously cow's milk, but it tastes very similar to that. It's kind of like sour milk. And but it became alcoholic too. It was about 5% alcohol, so it was kind of like beer, and everywhere you'd go people would offer it to you. So you'd be horseback and you walk, they see a guy with a beard. Nobody over there has beards, and they would just freak out when they would see a beard. They were so excited. And so they'd always invite you into their place, and part of their culture
Just so they
was
can
to
touch
offer
your beard? Like,
Yeah, just
what did they want to do to your
you.
beard?
Yeah, they wanted to touch it. They wanted to see it. When I first got there, a bunch of old men.
Okay, this is the best thing I've ever heard in my life, man.
Just
I'm
a bunch of
getting, like,
Mongolians.
this old man just
Yeah.
stroking your face.
Well, he goes, I get to the airport, and I wasn't there very long, and this old man goes like this, like he's gonna cut my head
Whoa.
off. And I was like,
Oh dear.
And then I would see that pretty regularly, and I finally found somebody that could translate. I was like, why do I keep doing that? And he's saying, oh, they want to trade you heads. They want to have your beard. And they would like to trade heads so they could grow a beard.
Oh
Whoa.
my god, that's like
What a
Face Off. What's that
compliment.
movie where they switch the faces? God damn, that's crazy, bro. That's amazing. Wow. Okay, so tell us a little bit about more of that experience. Mongolia on its own. You're in the middle of nowhere. People are stroking your beard. You're drinking mare's milk. Like, at what moment do you take a step back and go like, holy shit, like I'm living, like I'm doing this. This is what I've one day aspired to do, and I'm here. I'm doing it.
Yeah, there was one particular moment, and I knew before I ever even got to Mongolia that I had to stop and kind of recollect and think about, because that was my last stop. That was essentially the end of the journey, the last continent. And so I never really stopped to reflect on that until I got up to these reindeer people, which was quite an adventure just getting there, because there's no roads or anything. And so there was one day where we went out to gather firewood, and they had these ancient, like, Soviet chainsaws. Must have been one of the very first ones ever made. And we went out and cut down a handful of trees, and we had a whole string of reindeer behind us. And we packed them full of logs, as many as they could carry. And then we packed them out of the mountains there back down into their camp, because they just lived in teepees. And about that time, we were coming out of the trees, and a great big thunderstorm rolled in right on top of us. And there's just lightning crashing. And I'm sure both of you guys have been horseback in thunderstorms, and you could really like feel that energy, and it comes through your horse and everything. And so we're on reindeer, but you could feel the air was just charged, and it was dumping down rain, and it was cold. It was miserable. And that was when it all clicked. And I was like, man, this is living. We did it.
Dude, yeah. Packing out on reindeer, getting caught in a thunderstorm. That's insane. First thing I
Yeah.
thought of was, well, at least the reindeer probably didn't have shoes on. So
How do you shoot these tiny hoops?
you had that going for you, I guess.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. And you didn't have to shoe them. Even their stirrups, they would make their stirrups out of willow branches. And
I heard you talking about this on one of the podcasts. That's so freaking cool, man. Tell us about these stirrups. I thought that was so neat.
Yeah, I mean they don't go to town. There is no town to go to. So they have to make everything that they use for the most part, and including the saddles and the stirrups and most of the pieces of it. So
Wow.
the saddles they rode were just hand whittled, hand carved wooden trees. And then they
Just like a
put
pack
some.
saddle tree type of thing, right? I heard you saying.
Exactly. Exactly. It looks just like a tree you'd see on any mountain here in North America on a pack horse, but it's a smaller version of it, and they would whittle it out by hand or with an axe or whatever it was, and then they would put padding over top of it so it's a little bit more comfortable, and then they would just use rope down to kind of a bell shaped willow branch that they would steam
Wow.
and bend and tie together, and that's how they'd make their stirrups.
Yo,
Then
Cole, unless you're roping beef on a willow stirrup, you ain't no cowbell, bro. You can't talk to me about being a cowboy. No.
I'm literally sitting here listening to all this, starting to recognize that I am basically built to be a Mongolian cowboy. I'm 5'8", 140 pounds, so I'm ideal to ride and break reindeer.
You were
So I guess
made for this, man.
my next question is, what are the Mongolian cowgirls like? I guess because that's where I'm headed.
No, they're pretty good. I mean, it's a pretty simple way of living. So I think it's 60 or 70% of that country is still nomadic. They live
Yeah.
like in essentially a wall tent or a teepee kind of thing in canvas, and they just move when the grass runs out. When their animals run out of grass, they pack up and they move to the next spot where there's grass available. So it's essentially free grazing everywhere. There's really no private land at all. So it's as long as you're not disturbing anybody else, you can go wherever you want and do whatever you want. And so essentially, if you wanted to move to Mongolia, I think one of those tents, brand new, top of the line, is about $5,000. So you can move over there, buy one of those tents, find yourself a wife, and go find somewhere to set it up, and you can live there.
That's amazing. This nomadic life, there's something about this that has always been very, like a strong desire for me. You know, I've always loved to travel. I was talking to Cole about this. This is one of the things that really um, fascinate me about your story and you is that we don't meet a lot of cowboys that like to travel or that can travel, right? Like you're a cowboy, you're taking care of animals, you're rodeoing. Like it's tough to just pick up and go to other places on vacation or to find work. And that's what Cole and that's what made us hit it off so much is that we both love this cowboy culture, but we also love to travel. And I was interested in finding out about you. Like, is that something you've always wanted to do? Did you always want to travel, or is that something that came later on in life for you?
So where it came from is I was riding bulls at the University of Wyoming, and I had rodeoed from the time probably 12 or 13 up until about 21, 22, and I had a pretty bad bull riding wreck, and I continued to ride after that a little bit, but it was never the same. I wasn't there to win like I was beforehand. And so I decided it was probably time to hang that up. And when that happened, it left a huge void in my life. And I was trying to figure out what could potentially fill that void. And I saw a video on YouTube one day of these guys catching wild bulls in Australia. And I thought, man, that looks cool. That looks like something I could probably do. And it kind of checks the box as well for filling that void of having nothing really kind of fun or crazy to go do after rodeo. And so there was a gal named Lizzie that was doing study abroad at the University of Wyoming when I was there. And I asked her if she could get me a job. And it was pure luck that her brother happened to own one of these crews that catches wild cattle.
Sick.
So she set me up with that job. I went down there and did that, came back, and I had one semester of college left. And somebody was telling me that they had a master's degree and they were getting passed over for jobs by people that were bilingual, that had a high school education. And I did not speak a second language, did nothing even close to that. And so I thought, well, if that's the case, maybe I should go learn to speak some Spanish. And so I went to Argentina to learn Spanish. And it wasn't until I came back from there that then my brother said to me when I was real down and out one day, he said, you've already cowboyed on three of the six possible continents, you might as well go for the rest. So it wasn't until about halfway that really became a goal to hit them all. It was just me being young and full of piss and vinegar, wanting to see everything and try everything.
That's very cool. And then having somebody from the outside looking in being like, "Hey man, just keep going."
Yeah, exactly.
That's huge. Um, let's talk about Australia because, like you said, you had a void to fill. And this is something we brought up with Casey Field because when you go from getting on the rankest bucking horses in the world to, oh, I'm retired now,
Hmm.
like where do you get that internal combustion that's
That
gonna
Yeah.
adrenaline.
take over and basically keep you at bay from going insane? So, how wild and western did it really get in the outback going after them bulls? Because, yeah, you're in little utes with that weird like headlock thing, and you get a hold of these suckers, and then
Yeah.
like sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, you get a hold of their tail, trip them down, jump on them. Like,
Hmm.
like how much more intense was it when you actually got boots on the ground?
It was I mean, riding bulls or bucking horses or anything like that, it's a huge adrenaline rush, but it's fairly short. I mean, it's there when you're on the back of the bucking chutes, when you get on. By the time you are packing your gear back up, it's kind of gone away. In Australia, it was pretty much all day, every day. Something was trying to kill you. There was something dangerous happening, and so it was everything I expected and then some. And when I went over there, we were in the middle of nowhere. I slept in a bedroll for 4 months. I think I slept inside one day, and that was the day that I went back to Brisbane and I was just waiting to catch my flight out of Australia. And I slept at a friend's house there, and that was the only time I slept indoors the whole time I was there. And we'd go out and we'd gather feral cattle up, but we would also catch these bulls because a lot of the bulls were herd quitters. And as soon as we would start pushing all the cows and everything in one direction, they'd more or less stay together. And those bulls would just quit us and head the opposite direction. And so we couldn't be leaving all these pastures and bulls behind and not doing anything with them. So that was where the bull catching came in. As soon as a bull would quit us and go the other way, we'd all spin around and go after them and catch them. And they had been doing this for a long time where they would leave the bulls. So basically, that country that we were working, it was an Aboriginal community, which was the same as like an Indian reservation here. It was land that had
Mm.
been gifted back to them. And when they were gifted the land, I can't remember when exactly that was, but they decided it was a fully functioning working cattle station. They decided they didn't want to use it that way. They just wanted the land and they wanted to live on it and nothing else. And so basically, this was like a cattle station that had reverted back to nature over 60 or 70 years, where all the fences went down, nothing had been culled off, no bulls had been pulled. So it
Oh
was back to
no.
being 50% bulls, 50% cows. And a lot of them had never seen a person. And so we got hired basically to clean this up and help them turn it back into a functioning, profitable beef business, essentially. So we had a lot of bulls to catch in the summer I was there. I think we caught about 3 or 4 thousand bulls. That just put a dent in it. That did not
What?
clean it up. Like there was probably 10 or 15 thousand there to catch.
Whoa, what do they pay per bull? Like what does the scope look like?
I think so. This was 10 or 11 years ago, and I think they were getting about $800 a head for these bulls,
Wow.
rough on average. And so we'd go out and catch these bulls, and we were just contractors. We were a crew that was brought in to clean all this up, and we were also hired onto some other stations that were neighbors. And they were well run, put together. So that was a little bit easier work. It was mostly gathering cows and calves and branding them, weaning them, that kind of stuff. But on this Aboriginal place, it was wild. I mean, it was like apocalyptic ranching essentially. And so we didn't have you're talking about that hydraulic arm that a lot of people see. That's a fairly new piece of technology, and we did
Okay.
not have one of those. So everything we did was all tailing them down, tying them up. And we also had four wheelers and those bull catchers you were talking about. And you could essentially pit maneuver them and spin them out and knock them over. So we would catch them that way, and then we would also just, on dirt bikes or whatever we had, we would go out and grab hold of their tail and throw them down on the ground and tie them up.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting you say that, because here in North America and most parts of the world, we talk ropes, right? Horses, ropes.
Yeah.
But these places are so big. Like, a lot of us have seen the helicopters chasing these cows. Like, the extensions are ginormous. Like, you need like 50 horses for every day's work. Tell us about the size of these ranches that you're working at.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We would, so the base, I think we had total between all those operations that we worked for, it was something like 6 million acres that we were trying to cover. And so we used choppers, and basically the choppers made the big circles, and they would go out on the very outside, and they would find where these bunches of cattle were. So if there was something that needed manpower there on the ground, they would radio down to us and say, go to this spot. There's 50 head. You can bring them all out in a bunch. Or sometimes they would just fly around and pick up stragglers and kind of bunch them up, and then we'd come get the bunches when we were on the ground. But like you say, a lot of people, that's the most common thing I hear from Americans or North Americans is, oh, why didn't you do it horseback? Why didn't you rope them? But I would ride a dirt bike some days, and that dirt bike just out making loops, catching a few bulls, it had an odometer on it, and I'd do 200 Ks in a day easy. So
wow,
it's
on
just
a dirt bike.
On a dirt bike. Yeah, you're just flying around looking for bulls, looking for cattle.
You're sleeping like shaking probably at night, like your muscles are just like contracting. Yeah.
Dude, but this is what we're talking about like the importance of traveling, because like you're only asking me this because you genuinely think that how we do it here is how it goes everywhere else. And that's not reality, man. And you got to step out of your own bubble to see that and experience and be like, oh, 6 million acres. Okay. I guess I see now why we're not saddling 4-year-olds, like.
Yeah. And I don't think, I never take offense to that when people, think that this is the best way of doing it, because it generally, from what I have experienced, is people just don't know. But more than likely, once they do learn, I mean, I love telling these stories, educating people on this kind of stuff, and just showing them that, those are very famous last words in a lot of parts of America, that's the way Grandpa did it, so we're going to do it that way. And that's cool. But to run a business that way, you can't run the entire business that way. And so opening your eyes a little bit to the way the world is changing and the newer problems that we're facing, I hope that sometimes these stories and people seeing, there's more than one way to skin a cat, that goes all across ranching. It's not just catching wild cattle. There's a lot of different things that could be learned from other places.
That's very true, man. That's very true. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have today with ag in general, whether you're farming or ranching, it's exactly what you said, it's always been done this is the way we do it. And the world's not built like that anymore, right? Technology's coming in, markets changing, and in order to survive, you have to keep up with the times. And I think what you've done is just like Cole said, that's what traveling is all about. You know what I mean? You don't hear about it. You don't read about it in the book. You feel it. Like, you're there with these people and you're surviving with them. And in order to survive, you need to be adaptable. You need to listen to them. You need to talk less, what I mean? And I think those are such important lessons, to just be like, hey, this guy is a vaquero. He's lived his entire life in Argentina. I'm going to keep my freaking mouth shut and watch what he does and learn and try to do the same. Whereas today in society, it's the opposite, right? People just think they know everything and they want to talk way more than they want to listen. So what an amazing story to share to people, especially the youth. Just so many lessons to be learned there and what you've done. But let's go. So now let's travel on this as if we're actually doing it. So you leave the US, you go to Australia. How long are you there for?
About 4 months.
4 months. And then from Australia, do you go back to the US or do you automatically go to your next location?
Yeah, I went back to the US, and I had 1 semester left of college. So I finished both my degrees. And it was pretty shortly after that I already kind of knew that I didn't want to have an adult job. So I started
Mhm.
looking for other places to go travel to, and at that time, Mexico to me seemed a little bit too dangerous, especially not speaking the language. So the next best, I looked at Brazil too, but I was like, I don't know how useful in my everyday life Portuguese is, but Spanish I
100%.
could use almost every day. And
Mhm.
so then Argentina was the next option. And so I didn't know how to find anybody down there in Argentina. So what I started doing is I went through a bunch of brand registries and like any kind of rodeo associate, anything I could find that had an email associated to a person. I made a list of those emails and I made an email in English and then I translated it to Spanish. And I basically said, you don't have to pay me, but I'll work for free if you'll just give me a place to sleep and food. I just want the experience. I want to learn. And so I sent off probably 150 of these emails and one of them got back to me. But that's the one I went down there to.
Wow.
Wow, right?
Wow.
Game of
So
numbers,
who's
baby.
this? The one person who got back to, I'd love to know where and what was their name?
There so that place was actually kind of a dude ranch setup. And so to them, it was appealing to them that I could ride but also spoke English because a lot of their guests would be English
Of
or
course.
English speaking or that, that was at least the common denominator. There was a lot of European guests that would come down, but they mostly spoke English. So uh that place was a dude ranch right outside of Cordoba and
Nice.
I'm trying to remember the name of the little town, but I didn't actually stay there that long because I signed on to that place and went down there and I was spending more time in the kitchen and doing laundry and stuff like that. I mean, you were kind of expected to do every aspect of the dude ranching and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, I was like, man, I'm not here to learn how to cook eggs. I'm here. I want to learn. I want to be out there with these gaucho guys and learning what they do. And so I was there about a month and before a guy I worked with that was a local, he said, well, my neighbor is a vet. And I talked to him and I'm sure he said he would love to have your help. So I was there about a month and I left and I went and started working for this vet in a different part of the country, which was right there on the Brazilian border. It was Corrientes is what is the state that, and so
Hat,
that's where I
hat,
went.
hat.
Very hot, kind of jungly. There was capybaras and stuff everywhere, and it was
Yeah.
like pretty swampy, a lot of that country.
Yes, sir.
What's a
So it
kappa what?
wasn't a capybara. That part where I went, people always think of Patagonia when they think of Argentina, and so people always have these
Yeah.
questions about Patagonia and the mountains and all that stuff. And I never went to that part of Argentina. I would love to go one day, but I was,
Yeah.
right there on the Brazilian border where it's very hot, very humid.
It's
It's a
jungle,
swamp.
jungle weather. Yes, sir.
Hmm.
Swampy. A lot of flies makes it very hard to care for these cattle. The bot, I guess they're called bot flies. Like I always tell people,
Oh
like,
yeah.
you think it's hard having animals in freaking Canada and the US? We have bot flies that will implant a freaking being inside of you, whether humans, I've had it a bunch of times at home, or animals. Like you got to check these cattle every day because it will get real nasty if you're not on top of it, right?
Yeah, that was one of the very first when I went and started working with this vet up north. One of the very first days I was there, I was working with all these guys that they couldn't read, they couldn't write. They were good horsemen, but they had lived on that ranch their entire lives. And one of our very first jobs is there was a cow that had a bunch of those bot flies embedded in her necks and shoulder. And so
Yeah.
we had to get her in and we tripped her down and tied her up and they went to pushing out all these bot fly larvae.
Isn't it so gratifying though? Like I hate it. They
Yeah.
come out with hairs, Cole. Like these things are white, and if they're big enough, there's like hairs on them. Like it's
Gross.
disgusting. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's one of the most gratifying things you'll ever do in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just popped all these little like bugs out of this. And at this time, my Spanish is still not great. Like I'm learning a little bit every day and I'm using this app called Duolingo, which
Mhm.
would I'd use it for like 15 minutes a day and then go try these new words. But a lot of it, I was just listening and watching and trying to understand what was happening. And that was the case with this was just I didn't know why we were even mugging this cow to the ground and tying her up. And it wasn't until she was laying there that I started to see what they were doing. And then I saw these like bumps all over the cow and I realized what we were doing.
Oh yeah.
That's
Trial by
so
fire.
funny. It's so interesting, because the more you talk about it, we could talk about this for like 10 years. Like, whether you're talking about the mosquitoes in one place, the weather in another place, the pasture, the problems are all differently, right? Depending on where you are geographically, and the solutions are different. But I guess the meaning of it all is the same, right? You're caring for animals, you're living this lifestyle that is passed down from generation to generation. I love the gaucho culture for that. I think they're one of the few people that actually continue to celebrate, live it, and like hold on to it with claws.
Mhm.
Like if you tell them like you can't do this, they'll be like, I'm gonna kill you, like and your entire family, because like that's how passionate I am about this. And I find that that's a huge problem. We're just take tie down roping out of the rodeo. Oh, okay, we'll take it out. And once you start giving a little bit, you're gonna have to give it all, and those guys are very firm. So I love that you got to live that culture from Argentina. How long do you spend there, and where do you go next?
I plan to be down there. Well, I didn't buy a return flight because I really thought I might stay down there for a while. And while I was in that up north we were right there on the swamp, and the place I was staying had no windows. So there was mosquitoes everywhere every night. And so I didn't have a mosquito net or mosquito spray, none of that stuff. And
Oh,
so
you poor thing. That'd be
I
terrible.
yeah. So I found a box fan, and I would put that on me at night, and I figured that would keep some mosquitoes off, but I ended up getting very sick, and I didn't know why, but I mean that particular place to headquarters, we took a tractor. I rode in on a tractor fender 2 hours to get to headquarters off the
Oh
paved
my
road.
god.
And so all I knew was I did not feel good. It wasn't going away, and I didn't want to be out there sick.
Was
So
it malaria or dengue?
it ended up being Zika
Oh,
that
Yeah.
they think that I got. And so and
Wow.
that was right during the time that Rio was having the Olympics, and they were warning everybody not to come down and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the US, and they never, I don't think they ever 100% confirmed that, but I had stage 1 liver failure is what was making me feel so sick. And they
Man.
figured they did every test they could do at this little hospital back home. And they said it's nothing, common that we see here, but you obviously have a problem. And so they
Wow.
figured it was probably Zika.
they did
Welcome to Latin America.
they did the test they could do at this Latin American hospital. She just walks
Yeah.
up, puts her hand on your forehead. Yeah, you're hot.
Yeah, you're dying. We're
You're
gonna have to put you
sweating.
down. Come into this room. But it's funny. It's funny said because one of my friends, I took him to Brazil. He came back. He got bot flies, bro. Like no one knew what to do with them. And then like they had the whole hospital there, like students, like professors, people were like examining this guy's head because no one had ever seen a bot fly before. And
Yeah.
in Brazil, we all know, right? But you come here and there's something moving in your head. These guys are thinking there's an alien inside of them. But,
Crabs of the hair, as some call it.
but then where do you? So you go back home with Zika. I guess you get treated for that, and then what's the next stop?
Yeah, then I was back for probably 8 months or maybe a full year, and I bought a bunch of my own livestock and stuff, and I was kind of starting a business back in the States. That went horribly wrong, and I essentially lost everything. And it was right at that time where I was talking before that my little brother, he saw, we were homeless living out of my car. I had this $600 Buick that I bought, and I had
Wow.
sold everything else I owned to buy livestock, and I lost a ton of money, almost all the money I had on these livestock.
Where were you right now? Sorry, just to cut you off. Where are you at this point? Are you in Wyoming?
In Wyoming, yeah. And so
living out of your car.
yeah, we were living out on BLM land, just bouncing around, and it was me and my 15-year-old brother and two dogs that I had, and my saddle tied to the top, and that was pretty much all we had. So,
Bro, that sounds country as fuck.
What tanked the business? What happened?
well, without getting anybody in too much trouble, basically what I saw that you could, at that time, you could buy kid goats at essentially $1 a pound. You could get paid to go prescriptive graze with them all summer long. They do nothing but gain weight, and then when they're 120 pounds, they're still $1 a pound. So it seemed to me there's no way you can lose money doing this. You're buying and selling them at the exact same weight per pound. They're gaining weight, and you're being paid to prescriptive graze some of this really nasty invasive weeds and stuff that we have coming in here. And basically what happened was I didn't have a very good infrastructure set up. And so I was relying on somebody else's kindness to use their facilities, their trailers, all that to run. And I thought that would go on forever. And one day they just pulled the rug out from underneath me, and I lost all these contracts that I had. I lost all the facilities, basically everything. And so I was sitting there with a $600 car and several hundred goats that I had nowhere to go and no way to transport them, nothing. I was just stuck with them.
Damn.
And so then I had to haul them to the sale barn, and it was bad luck because the day I was able to rent a truck to haul them down there, we dropped them at the sale barn, and it was the lowest goat prices in I don't know how many years. Everybody decided to show up that day, and I wasn't there to no sale them. So the sale barn bought them at half what I had paid for them months prior, and then they just fed them for a week and doubled their money the next week. So it was just a lot of bad luck that all came at once. But it was sheep and goats, just prescriptive grazing stuff, and that did not go well.
Damn.
Wow, that's very interesting. This is a world I had no idea about.
Yeah.
I didn't know that the government would pay you to put these animals out there, but it makes sense, right? To stop these weeds from moving in. Wow. And so what is the mindset you're in right now? You've lost your business. It's your first business, I imagine, endeavor you go into. What are you feeling? How do you get out of the situation, and what's the next spit up?
Yeah, I was pretty down and out and just living with my brother out of that car for a while. And my brother was only with me for the summer because he was getting in a bunch of trouble at school. So he got sent to me to straighten him out. And I don't know if we did any straightening that summer. I feel like maybe I just taught him worse stuff. But so after he went back to high school, I got a job, and I just went and helped on a hay crew for a little while and made a couple grand. And my brother had told me that. He said, why don't you just keep going for the rest of the continents? And a year prior to that, I had gone to a ranching for profit school, which is like a week-long kind of master class jammed into a week on just business management, specifically for ranching. And while I was there, I had met a gal from Sweden, and she had never seen the goat or sheep production. And so she was interested in seeing it. And so after the class ended, she came and spent a day or two with me seeing how this all worked. And she said, well, my family owns one of, if not the largest ranch in Northern Europe. If you'd ever like to come over and see it, you're welcome. And so that was in the back of my mind. And I thought, now is probably the time to go, because I've got enough money to buy the flight over there, and I've got nothing but time. So I bought my flight, flew over there to Sweden, and I ended up staying over there for 3 months working for her and her family.
Tell me this. I imagine it's like Swedish princess, just the most beautiful woman you've ever laid eyes on. Be like,
that's what I was thinking.
My
Like,
father operation,
Yeah.
3 million.
cows
have
and
next flight.
blondes.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. And
I knew it.
It was a super interesting setup that they had, because I don't fully understand this, but for sure in Sweden, and I think a lot of Europe, there's a cap on how much land you can privately own. Okay. And because of that, it's essentially impossible to own enough land to run a large ranch. People don't really own. Maybe there may be some people grandfathered in from a long time ago, but for the most part, you can't just go out and buy up all these pieces and make a ranch out of it. So what made their place interesting is that most of these cattle production places in that part of the world are, if they've got 50 head, that's a big outfit over there. This family had signed a long-term lease with the military. And so they got the grazing rights on this great big, it was a panzer division of the Swedish military. So it was tanks and all these large, heavy vehicles. And they needed big, wide open spaces to do their drills and to test and all that stuff, but they didn't want the grass to be chest high in all these fields that they used. So this family had signed a deal with them, a long-term lease, where they were running, I don't remember what it was. It was like 1,500, 1,600 mother cows.
Whoa.
And they had traveled a lot. Also, the father, the kids, they'd all seen a lot of the world ranching, and they'd been in Canada, the U.S., Australia, and so they had seen the benefits to working cattle horseback as opposed to machines. And so people don't do that in Europe or specifically up there in Sweden for the most part.
Yeah.
And so they were buying like these hunter jumper rejects and slapping an imported Wade Tree saddle on them, and they'd take them to work cows. And well, after a couple years, they had them working pretty well. But you can't just go buy a cow horse in Sweden; they don't exist.
Yeah.
So everything that they had was either imported or they made it themselves, like something as simple as like portable panels. They don't really use those in Europe. So when they wanted a portable corral setup, they had to call somebody in Canada, have them make it, put it in a shipping container and ship it to them. And it took a year and a half to get there.
Wow, so these people were actually running like a Wyoming or an Alberta style ranch in Sweden, and
Yes.
just wow, that's cool. See, that's what we're talking about, just going out there and learning and bringing the best of everything and then applying it to your operation. How cool is that, having that open mind, right? That's so cool.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was a lot of the practices they used were similar to what I was used to back home. But what their biggest hurdle was dealing with the government, the amount of government oversight that was happening there and still does happen there is incredible. So there was all these crazy rules that I wouldn't have even imagined. But for example, the EU vets could show up on your place at any given time unannounced. And whatever you were doing that day, you had to stop. And if they would say, we want to test that herd of heifers over there, you'd have to go gather them, bring them into the facilities. They would sort off which ones they wanted to see. And then you would have to sit there with them while they did their testing, because hormones of any kind in Europe are illegal in beef cattle. So they would sit there and collect a urine sample from these, whatever they wanted, and just to make sure that their hormone levels, nothing was out of whack. And they would show up unannounced and do that. I think it happened twice while I was there in 3 months. So, you couldn't plan for it. You had no idea it was coming. So things like that, like branding is illegal, roping is illegal. You can't fertility test bulls because electroejaculation is illegal. You can't collect semen. Importing semen is incredibly expensive. So there's just a lot of things that made their lives a lot more difficult. So then they'd have to go out and buy bulls, but you can't fertility test. So you need to buy 2 to 3 times what you think you need, and just this hope that half of them are fertile. And then you kick them out in these great big pastures. But for them, they're the only people in Sweden with big pastures. So these people are essentially raising like dairy bulls on concrete floors in barns. And they're buying bulls like that to kick out into a 10,000 acre pasture and hoping that they stay sound. So it was just a lot of government regulation that made that difficult there.
Damn, sounds like I'd want to pull my hair out.
Yeah. It
Sounds like Trudeau is the prime minister. But isn't that crazy though, how these people in offices in the capital of these countries are getting in the way of those putting food on tables? Like the hardest working people in the world are farmers and ranchers. Like,
dude, it's like a
they
Gestapo
just-
showing up. It's like, we want to see them over there. It's like,
yeah,
all
show me
right.
the piece of that cow right now. Yeah, man, ridiculous. It's interesting here you say that, but that's just a reality of these socialist countries. Tell me, so from Sweden, how long are you there? And then next we go to South Africa?
Correct. Yeah. I was in Sweden for just under 3 months, because in that Shigren area, without a work visa, you get 90 days
90
on your
days.
tourist. So I filled it as much as I could. I did take a week off and go to Barcelona, and I took a week off and went to Rome. and there was no
Were you looking
ranching
at the
or
cattle
anything.
there, or what were you doing in Barcelona?
No, I just wanted to see it.
He
So
was
they
looking at
basically
heifers, all
said,
right.
Okay. We won't talk too much about that trip. I wanna find out more later on in the next episode. We'll deep dive Barcelona. And then sorry, so then you go to Barcelona. You went to where else did you say you went?
Rome.
Rome. Cool.
Yeah. Went to Rome for a week, and then, but other than that, it was all in Sweden. So from there, almost everywhere that I went, I would spend my time there, and I would basically stay until I ran out of or had just enough money to buy my flight home. I'd get home and then I'd go find some ranch work and save up a couple grand while doing that and then travel again. But in this particular time, I thought I could make enough money or save enough to go from Sweden straight to South. Well, I flew to Dubai for a week, checked out all that, but that again was just kind of touristy, not so much seeing ranching or anything. But so then I go from Dubai down to South Africa, and I spent about 6 months total down there in South Africa, just bouncing around between different outfits, working with a couple different veterinarians and doing all kinds of stuff down there.
Well, I was going to say this. I was listening to one of your podcasts and that you had been on, and you were talking about that. You know what the experience in Africa was like, and just an eye-opening experience. Which I think a lot of people, like I always say this, like people always ask me, like, man, my kids, like they're so spoiled. What do I do with them? I'm like, send them to a third world country, like regardless of where it is. Well, Africa, Central America, like you will learn so much more being in those countries about life itself, about just being thankful for how blessed we are, about how hard life can be for some people, that it changes you as a person, you know, whether you want to or not. I think it really does shake you up to your core when you go to simple places like that. And the other side of it is that you think they're all going to be unhappy, and they're the happiest people you've ever met. You know what I mean? They have such little things that create these jails in North America. You got to pay these things off, and then people get into these like rat wheels and hate their lives because there's no meaning to it, because you'll never find meaning from plastic. But I wanted to hear a little more about your experience down there and how that changed you as a person.
Yeah, that's generally how I always describe Africa when people ask me that. That was the most soul shaking place that I've ever been. And it just seeing people exactly like you say that are just almost have nothing. And the guys that I was working with side by side every day, these guys are making $300 a month, and they're feeding their wife and kids with that, and they live in a stone shack on the backside of the ranch that they're working on. And it's just a very rough, very simple way of life. But like you said, I also learned that I think those people were some of the happiest people that I've ever met. And they were much, much more present than the average American in my experience, because they weren't planning for 40 years down the road. They weren't looking at a 401k. They weren't looking at investments. Because in their mind, tomorrow is not promised to them, which is true for everybody. Yeah. But I think in more developed countries, it's kind of pushed on you that you will get to be old and you will get to cash in on that retirement. And if you just suffer through 40 years of a 9 to 5, you'll live a great life after that. Which,
the golden handcuffs, right?
yeah, and and down there, that they've never even heard of that. That just doesn't exist to them. And because of that, they live every day like it's not like YOLO, go party your ass off kind of thing, but it really, things matter more to them, what they do every day, because they might not be alive tomorrow or next.
It's like and it's the real things, right? Like I think it's like you said, being present. You know, it's being with your family. It's having time to spend with your children. It's you're not worried about the price of oil or what the dollar did that day, or all these these things that we worry about in society today, which mean nothing, right? When you go to a primal existence of finding shelter, finding water, finding food, surviving every day, there's something so strong about that. It's so innate in our DNA, and it just fulfills you differently as opposed to, you know, looking at the stock market and seeing how much you made and things like that, which I think drives so many people in developed nations into anxiety, into depression, into all these diseases. They're real diseases that we see today, and they just like they're I find it's like the one thing that we can't control, and it's living in a world that we try to control everything, you know, and you find that when you go to places like Africa, you can't control some things. And what an experience for you at such an early age to see that. How about the cattle? How about the ranching? What was that like down there?
Yeah, they were somewhat similar to here as well. It reminded me a lot of Wyoming, other than they dealt with the heat a lot, and so they had more heat resistant cattle down there. So they actually, the biggest breed that I saw down there was Beefmaster cattle, which was kind of interesting to me, that being an American developed breed, but it's done very well in South Africa. So they had a bunch of different breeds and stuff like that, but it was, I guess I shouldn't say it was like Wyoming ranching. It was a lot closer to West Texas, where they're dealing with the heat. It's fairly dry, and it's you know, but they're big operations, and they had a lot of cattle, and a lot of times they crossed. There was very few places that just raised cattle. A lot of times it was, they had a farming side of the operation and then a ranching side of the operation, and any feed that they had to grow for their cattle to feed them out usually was grown there. It wasn't quite like here where it's being brought in from somewhere else. And so it was really cool to see. It was a very stark difference coming from Sweden down to Africa, though, because in Sweden, labor is so expensive up there that they invest heavily into machinery and technology, because it's cheaper to invest in that than to like invest in people, where the opposite was true in Africa, where they had almost no technology, and it was all just done with strong backs and hard hands and a lot of employees.
Damn. Yeah, kind of employ the community type situation, I guess, eh?
Yeah, I mean they essentially owned entire towns. So like a farm or a ranch would be there, but they would, like the one operation I spent the most time on, there was probably between 40 and 50 laborers on the ranch side of things, and then there was 40 to 50 laborers on the farm side of things. So you've got 100 employees, and generally housing
Plus their
is part
families,
of,
right? Their kids.
yeah.
They're like, yeah.
So a couple hundred people, and generally housing is a big part of the deal when you employ
Yeah.
people. So they
Yeah.
essentially owned whole small towns that were just right there on the land.
Yeah, it's cool to Brazil. We have the same kind of formats. You know, the ranches and the farms are so big that you have schools, you have, you know,
Hmm.
a store for them. You have like literally when you get like the mom works, the dad works, they each have two kids, they got grandma. You got a couple hundred people there, like you said. It's really interesting to see these big setups. I'm interested to know is, are they on horseback in Africa, like in South Africa? What are the ranches like? Are they run more like the Australian ones, or are people on the back of a horse?
So what I thought was interesting in Africa is there's a small landlocked country in the middle of South Africa that's called Lesotho. And Lesotho is up high in the Drakensberg Mountains. And essentially, my understanding of why it exists is when Shaka Zulu a couple hundred years ago came down and conquered most of southern Africa, they never could take Lesotho because they had the high ground. It was cliffs on all sides. And so they fought off Shaka Zulu. And so because of that, they were never part of South Africa.
Wow.
And so they're their own small little landlocked country. Now, modern day, it's probably not so smart that they aren't, because financially, economically, they're struggling a lot more than South Africa is. But those people that live up there in Lesotho are fantastic horsemen.
Wow.
Other than them, though, it was pretty rare to find good horsemen or people that wanted anything to do with horses at all in Africa, because as far as farm workers go, because there's no safety net in Africa. And so if you fall off a horse and break your leg or something like that happens where you are no longer able-bodied and able to work, that nobody's coming to save you. And so that was what the farm workers told me, is they said they would rather walk and know that they will be fine that day than take the chance of falling off of a horse and potentially, I mean, that's almost a death sentence in a place like Africa, because there's no welfare, there's no charities, there's no nothing coming to save you. And so you might survive the broken leg, but then you can't work and nobody's going to take care of you. So that was kind of their mindset towards horses, other than the guys from Lesotho. The Lesotho guys, they were amazing horsemen, and they had almost nothing. So they would use, like, the saddle pads they used most of the time were dog food bags, and they'd take spent wool from the shearing shed that was dirty or no good, and they'd stuff those dog food sacks, and that's what they'd make saddle pads out of. And so their horses were their lives. I mean, it was certainly the most expensive thing they owned, the most important thing they owned. And these guys could make these horses lay down and roll on their back. And I mean, it was like their best friend. It was really cool to see. But other than them, you probably weren't getting a lot of farm workers to crawl on a horse down there.
Man, what an incredible story. I would have had no idea that they were just landlocked away, putting in work.
Yeah.
That's
I'd love
pretty
to go. You've just like, I hate you. I got so many places I need to go, and now you've added an extra one. You son of a bitch.
What was the Richter scale for danger like when you're in Africa? Because obviously when you're in Australia, everywhere you put a bedroll, everywhere you step, where you fill a canteen, everything like that, you got to have eyes in the back of your head. What was like that in Africa?
Africa was it was a little bit different, where generally the danger was man-made. It not so much the animals or wild animals that were there. There's just a lot of crime down there, and also in my experience, life is cheap, and so people don't really think twice about causing you physical harm down there. It's just a part of everyday life. So I witnessed a bank robbery. I mean, I was robbed in Africa before I stepped out of the airport. I got robbed in Johannesburg in the airport. So the danger there was much more just putting yourself in a bad situation. There was one kind of interesting story I had down there. I went out hunting with a buddy, and we were hunting springbuck. And as the sun was coming up, I started hearing some it sounded like an engine off in the distance, but we are way out in the middle of nowhere in the Karoo Desert. And it started getting louder and louder. And I'm laying on a rock with my crosshairs on this springbuck, just letting it get close enough that I can shoot it. And it gets louder and louder. And then finally I realized that those were lions. It wasn't an engine. It was lions roaring. And as they started to get louder, it was pretty obvious that they were just on the other side of the ridge from where we were. And I had, I think, 4 bullets in that gun. And so I look at my buddy who's South African, and I said, I ain't shooting the springbuck. I don't give a damn about the springbuck. I'm keeping these bullets for the lions if they come over here. And he said, no, just shoot it. Just shoot it. And I said, that's like ringing the dinner bell. Surely they'll know, like, there's going to be, at the very least, a pile of guts here for them when we leave. And I said, I am not firing this gun. I have 4 bullets. We're like 2 miles from the pickup. I'm keeping him. Let's just walk out. And he said, he finally let me in on why he thought it was funny. Just the other side of the ridge was a high fence, and that was a preserve on the other side. So they were just the other side of the ridge, but they couldn't have got to us even if they wanted to. But so there are some wild animals down there. Like I know one of the ranches I worked on had a lot of problems with hyenas coming in and killing lambs and stuff like that, or jackals, which are essentially like a coyote. They cause the same type of problems. But for the most part, the danger in Africa was people more than it was animals.
The most dangerous animal. The people. Fucking ruin it for everyone.
The man.
All right, we're getting to an hour here. First of all, like, I can't thank you enough, Jake, for sharing your amazing stories with us. We could do this for, I feel like, 10 episodes and not get to everything you've lived. How old are you today? You're so young. You've lived so much.
I'm 31 now.
Wow, good for you, man. Good for you. 31 years old, and look at all the stories you have to tell.
Dude,
Before we finish, Cole's gonna have a question for you, which we ask everyone at the end of the podcast. But first, you're such a multifaceted guy. You know, you're a cowboy, you're an author, but you also have this YouTube channel called the Dusty Vaquero. It's also you're on Instagram. You have these amazing, like, I guess, interview footage of like musicians, right? Am I right? Like cowboy musicians. Tell us about that initiative. And you're having a festival that's so awesome. We need to get down there, Cole. Maybe we
Gillette.
can go down. Yeah, I would love to go to this festival. First time, right? Tell us about Dusty Vaquero Days. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So basically, what the channel is everybody that's on the channel. They're these solo acoustic music videos. Generally, I just go out to the ranches that these people work on or have a strong connection to, and we shoot the videos out there if possible. So not everyone's that way, but we just sit down and I mic them up, and there's no bells and whistles, nothing. It's just a stripped down.
It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. There's guys on horseback in the middle of it. Looks like Wyoming with stock trailers behind them and cool looking barns. Just amazing stuff.
Yeah, so that's the YouTube channel, and I had this idea last year. I thought, man, could you imagine if I could get all these guys who are never in the same place and put them in one spot together? It would basically be a music festival. And I said that idea to a couple friends that they were willing to help make it happen. So we started working on it, and now I guess it's the real deal. We're actually doing it. So May 30th and 31st in Gillette, Wyoming, we're doing the very first Dusty Vaquero Days. And it'll be, I think it's about 25-ish artists that are going to play up there. It's a 2-day festival. There's camping, all that stuff right there at the facility. It's at the same it's at the Camplex, which is where they do the high school finals a lot of times.
Yeah, I was gonna
that's
say
where I got to rope at the high school finals one year, Gillette,
Yeah.
Wyoming, man.
Gillette, Wyoming. Everyone's been there. If you've high school rodeo, you've been there. That's awesome, man. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get down there, but regardless, all the best of luck on that. That's so cool how, it's just cool to see how these things, and again, like if you've taken anything from this podcast, I'd say first is listen to people, but listen to your intuition, your heart. You know what I mean? He started just going to cowboy in other countries, and all of a sudden it turned into a book, a project, met amazing people, have these extraordinary stories, and the YouTube channel now becoming a festival as well. Like, how cool is that? That's why you got to take that first step and make things happen. You never imagine where you're going to be in a couple years,
Big time.
Yeah.
So then that leads to our final question for you here. As you know, what the show is called, Should Have Been a Cowboy. So we like to ask our guests, since you already are a cowboy, what would you be if you weren't a cowboy?
Oh, when I was younger, I was really into dirt bikes and mountain bikes and stuff like that. And I just liked things that gave you a rush. I didn't grow up ranching, so I guess I did, but I didn't come from a ranching family. So I didn't really get on a horse until I was about 7. And around that age, I got really hooked on it, and I pursued it a lot further. But up until then, I was really into mountain bikes and dirt bikes and stuff like that. So had I never stepped on a horse at that age, I think probably I would have pursued something like that, being a professional mountain biker or racing dirt bikes or something like that.
That'd be cool, doing like tricks and stuff for Monster at all the big events. That'd be rank.
Yeah,
The
that
Nitro
would be really
Circus?
cool.
That's awesome. Adrenaline Seeker, thank you so much, buddy. Thank you for making the time to chat with us, and best of luck with the book. And are there any more books in the works? Do you have any other projects?
Potentially. I write a lot of poetry too, and I'd never have really showed it to many people until recently.
Well,
And all of these people have been like, "Man, you got to make a book out of this." So we'll see. I've got a bunch. I'd have to kind of just put it together and narrow down what I want, but potentially some poetry books, and I don't know, no telling, maybe there'll be another one in the future. But it was a long process to write the first one, so I'm not in a hurry to write the second.
yeah,
Oh,
I
that's
feel
awesome.
you on that.
Sounds like you got a lot of other really good projects going on anyway that's taking up time, and so that's
Right.
good.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Wow. Jake, the man who is cowboyed all over.
That's awesome, man. What a good episode. I really mean it. Like that's a guy I could talk to for like 10 days straight with a bottle of whiskey. Just like the stories would never end. And
Oh
that's for
man.
sure.
Especially like if you just got him going, I feel like one story would trigger the next, trigger the
Oh,
next, trigger the
yeah.
next, right? I love those moments with friends when you're just like Jordy and I had this actually right before I had left for Colorado,
Yeah.
remember? And we just got telling stories. You would probe and we'd start telling a story and then we'd
Yeah,
remember another one and remember
exactly.
another one. Like, yeah, that guy would be really, really fun to sit down with a case of Coors and have a good
Just
BS.
shoot the shit. Yeah, man, amazing. Well, I'm glad we got him on, and who knows who will be next? Only God knows.
Only God knows, man. Wanna know what I love about what's going on? You literally just text me people and are like, "Hey, we got this guy this day. You good?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, brother."
I'm ready to go, ready to go. No, and I think it's gonna be exciting because literally you're never gonna know who we're bringing on, what they do, what walk of life, but they're definitely gonna have a story to tell, and you can darn toot and be sure it's gonna be an interesting hour, 40 minutes of your life, because yeah, we're interested in people with cool stories, and I think there's so many of them around us. So I can't wait to bring them on.
Absolutely. So stick around, guys. Make sure you are following us wherever you listen to these deals. And if you want to see a little bit of our faces, check out our YouTube channel. Should have been a cowboy podcast. Other than that, what do you figure, Felipe?
I figure let's just end her. Thank you so much, buddy. Thanks for your time, and we'll see you next week.
See you next episode.